So, as Deirdre said, this last webinar of the year is called Preserving Our Cultural Heritage, Academic Libraries in the Community. And academic libraries have always, of course, preserved cultural heritage in the countries, the communities they work in. But it's only recently that they've really started to reach out and engage with those communities as well. So that's a completely new departure, a new role for the librarian, for the academic librarian, I should say. And we are extremely privileged to have 3 librarians who've done an awful lot in this area. And we're going to start with Amanda Rust, who's the Associate Director of Research and Learning at the University of Massachusetts in Lowell in the USA. And she has worked in academic libraries for more than 20 years, often in roles like this. Actually, she's always engaged with the local community, but she has many talents, and she's worked in digital humanities, digital archives, research and instruction, user experience, and she's a very deep thinker on lots of the subjects that librarians are reflecting on today. So Amanda, thank you very much for agreeing to present today, and would you like to go ahead? Thank you.
Sure. Hello and good morning, everyone. I will try the traditional fumble with sharing my screen. And there we go. So in theory, I think I'll just do one last double check that you're all seeing the slides, and I can see that. All right, so here I actually am, and good morning again, everyone. It's welcome to see you today or later online if you're looking at a recording. And so what I get to talk about a little bit today are local history and archives projects. And first, I do want to recognize our potentially global audience. What I will talk about is in the United States, but hopefully by sharing my specifics, you might find connections to your specifics. So today I want to share some stories and the ideas that have stuck with me the longest. I'm not at this point going to share actual names and dates and locations because it's been some time, and sometimes community archives work can be quite personal for all the people involved. So you will just have to trust me that this all actually happened. And if folks want to ever email me later, I'm happy to share more individually. So first, a little bit about me. I've been a librarian in the US for more than 20 years now at a few different institutions, a 2-year community college, a large private research university, and now a large public university. You'll notice I am not an archivist, so you should also talk to your local archivist. But I have been able to work with, in collaboration with archivists, community history and community archives projects for about 10 years. Most of this has not been at my current university, UMass Lowell, which is a great institution, but I'm pretty new here. UMass Lowell itself does have a lot of faculty and archivists who do community archives work, but I want to be upfront that I have not done that much here yet. But I do want to tell you a little bit about UMass Lowell while I have you here. It's a large public research institution in Lowell, Massachusetts, which is in the Northeast United States. And it really embodies a lot of the reasons that I wanted to be in higher ed. The university, of course, I am deeply biased, but does a really good job for students, particularly in value and social mobility. And I think you can see we've gotten some recent recognition, but you can also tell a lot from how the university publicity frames things, right? What matters is affordability, mobility, and helping students succeed. So this is where I work now, lots of great things to come, but today what I'm talking about happened at a prior institution. And before I start talking about community archives, I want to share what I think of as the wall of names. This is a slide that I've used in a few different presentations over the years, just some of the writers and thinkers and archivists and scholars from which I've learned so much. This is my own sort of idiosyncratic list, certainly not exhaustive. And a few of these folks I know well, most I don't know at all. But there has been a lot of writing and thinking around terms like community archives, participatory archives, and participatory research. Those terms may differ a little bit country to country, but in that theme. So I definitely encourage you to find either some of these authors or find the folks publishing and thinking about publishing on these topics in your own area of the globe. And finally, I've said this word a couple of times already, so I want to give my definition of community archives. I'd love to hear if other people have different definitions. So they are, as kind of Linda already said, archives in deep partnership with the community surrounding whatever your cultural institution is. But there's a lot of implications in that term. I think one implication is that these are often projects about relatively recent events, not always, but often, right? Because if you're working with a community, these are people that are alive, and if you are participating with the community, these are living people to participate with, right? So they tend to be about recent events. These are projects about and with a group of people in a community. Those people are connected to each other, maybe by geography or profession or ethnicity or other aspects of identity. There is ideally an implication in community archives that they are archives focused on how a group of people want to define and preserve their own history, as opposed to even how a more traditional institution, maybe like ours, might define their history. And community archives empower and give voice to that group. In the best version of this, they are community-led, right? So a lot of what I'm going to talk about is partnership and the idea that your institution is working in deep partnership with folks, where community members are making key decisions about what's collected, how it's described, how it's accessed, and how it's preserved. So that's my kind of quick definition. Maybe that wasn't that quick. So what am I going to talk about today? Today I want to tell you about a project that I think involves a lot of community archives work and different strands of that work. So this was, to give it a quick description, an oral history, photography, and special collections digitization project to preserve the history of a beloved building before it was sold and demolished for new development. And I want to publicly thank my colleague Dory Klein, a librarian in Massachusetts, who was a leader in this project. And again, this was not at my current institution, it's at a prior institution. In a lot of ways, I'm going to mostly focus on the oral history aspects of this project, but there were other elements, digitization and photography, but I'm going to mostly talk about the oral history piece. So this project was based in a United States city within a neighborhood that was and is quite racially and ethnically diverse. From the 1850s forward, this particular neighborhood saw successive waves of different immigrant groups, which became a vibrant mix over time, a very cool neighborhood, frankly. And our project focused on a space that was very important to two of those racial and ethnic groups. This group had an almost 100-year history in that neighborhood. People living together, working together, taking care of each other, building beautiful spaces. It was one of those neighborhoods that sound ideal, right? People know each other, all the families know each other. This particular racial and ethnic community also hosted political events and cultural events with national figures, right? So it's a real center of community and activity. So one proposal here is that to develop a good way to approach this local history project, we had to understand the deep history of the neighborhood. Like many neighborhoods over time, it had its ups and downs, but most importantly, it had what I would call what is termed specific targeted disinvestment. So here's where I'm going to try to give a short history of some urban development trends in United States cities. This might be very new to you, or you may recognize quite a bit of this in your own neighborhoods or know a lot about this already. Bear with me, I'm simplifying a lot of complex stuff. Targeted disinvestment, to try to define that, is where through deliberate human choices, city, state, federal, and private money was held back from this neighborhood. Real estate and banking policies in the United States made it harder for people living in specific areas, of which this neighborhood was one, to get mortgages, business loans, other forms of credit. It was easier for people in other neighborhoods to get credit. So a lot of these financial decisions were based on neighborhoods and ethnic and racial makeup within those neighborhoods, not as much on actual financial reality of those neighborhoods. It's a complex issue. You should read more about it. So over time, with disinvestment, land values decrease, and what you end up with on paper is an inexpensive and underused, and I'm using scare quotes around that, underused real estate in the middle of a major US city. This is all the framework that you have to know before, I think at least before you start this project. So I've summarized a lot of stuff here, but the kind of shorter version is by channeling investments away from ethnic and racial minority communities in cities, redlining and other policies like that in the US ensured their economic decline, which paved the way for urban renewal and gentrification. One more phrase on urban renewal, again, that I feel like you have to understand this project, is in the United States, those kinds of projects were often viewed as something that would benefit the city, but individual neighborhoods experienced great upheaval, right? Destruction of community ties, economic loss. Communities were geographically dispersed, right? Their houses and land were seized. They're geographically dispersed, and often not even compensated at fair market value. So the key terms here are urban renewal, gentrification, redlining. Please read more about that. I can only imagine there are similar patterns elsewhere. So that's the setting. So part one of this project is that it's occurring in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood. Prices are rising, so the people who lived in that neighborhood, who made it vibrant and exciting and cool and amazing, who were refused mortgages and loans because they lived there, could no longer afford to live there. So a moment of reflection for folks watching or listening later are, what are the patterns of movement and redevelopment in neighborhood history in your area? And I think often with local history, that's something that you'll want to understand. And a takeaway is maybe obvious, but you really have to understand neighborhood history from the perspective of neighborhood groups. So from the perspective of the people that live there. And so sort of part two of this oral history project that was a little interesting in our case is, what if, and this may be the situation for you, your university borders a neighborhood where residents are being displaced and your university itself is being seen as a gentrifier. So one moment of reflection there for us is, have our organizations benefited from local trends that have actually harmed other nearby groups? And one of my take-home messages from this was, if you are not from a particular neighborhood, people may view you with mistrust, and possibly for quite good reason. And it's really important to not take it personally. Maybe feel a lot of regret about the situation that got you there, but a lot of times if you are viewed with mistrust, depending on your context, maybe it is for really good historical reasons. So part three of our project is, in order to do oral history, how do we build some trust, right? And really this is where our archivists have done years of work supporting community organizations without trying to get something out of it. This was all years, done before our project. Collections, when you are working with the collections of local neighborhood groups, they are an invitation to an ongoing relationship. So as our archivists did the regular work of archives, right, taking care of the materials, they also made a point to work with those neighborhood organizations and support their work as much as they could. This meant maybe prioritizing the needs of those neighborhood groups over university or archive needs, or at least at the same level of. So for example, our archivists would invite groups back to look at their records from 20 years ago. Help these groups create programs to celebrate organizational anniversaries, help them find stories to serve their fundraising needs, right? And again, this kind of support means for those organizational goals of your neighborhood partners rather than your university's goals only. Our archivists were also consistently there for our organizational partners. I believe this is probably a similar context globally, but you'll all tell me if it's not. A lot of small community organizations have the experience of many larger organizations reaching out, promising a lot of support, maybe doing support for a little bit, and then disappearing and fading when organizational interest fades. So it's possibly better to do smaller but consistent work than a big splashy project every 6 years. These kinds of nonprofit organizations are often quite thinly staffed, so you really have to work with their schedule. In our case, during our project, one group moved offices, and then a key person in that organization got the flu, and then there were some federal funding policies that affected their cash flow. So suddenly our project just dropped way down the priority list. Completely understandable. And we just had to make sure we were there and ready when they were. So my moment for reflection here for folks is, how has your archive or library already supported your community without expectations? Who do you already work with? And if you don't have a good answer, maybe start there before jumping to a larger community history project. And I really wish I could find a source for this phrase, but I heard it at a conference in a conversation a long time ago, and it's always stuck with me. Show up before you want something. So show up in your community before you need a grant partner, a project to make your university look good, or an initiative to fulfill a government requirement. So part 4 of this project is that it touched on gentrification in ways that were sometimes very painful to participants. So I mentioned this was the sale of a beloved building, and neighborhood groups themselves disagreed on whether it should be sold. Some people felt that that was leaning into the trend that had already damaged the neighborhood. Other people felt that by selling this building, it could ensure that the organizations that provided key services were financially solvent into the future, right? So the takeaway from that is that you may be dealing with strong emotions and documenting a controversial event. Our approach was to just share our process on who we chose to talk to and why, and just be very public and transparent about that. Finally, what I would say in this area is to be very aware of not sending relatively untrained undergraduate and graduate students out to do this work. That is definitely something I've seen a lot. So I know that we are getting close on time, so I sort of wanted to wrap up with talking about the problem with special funding versus base funding. And I imagine these are similar in your areas. You know, base funding is a line item that's in your yearly budget, that is part of your regular operations, versus special funding that comes with a timeline and expectations about very specific project outcomes. It is really hard to do trusting community work when you are focused on optimization and efficiency. I say with love, librarians love to make efficient workflows. This is not a bad thing, but it is hard to build trust when everything is based around your timeline for funding rather than what your partners and community organizations need. So I think I am at time for what we have now. I'm happy to talk a lot more about this later. My final thought is that sometimes when I sum up some of these takeaways, they feel like common sense. And so sometimes in preparing for a local history project, your question might be more, if this is hard at my institution, why is this hard? What are the expectations that make it hard to have slow, deep partnerships? Thanks very much.
Amanda, huge thanks for that. It was really informative and fascinating too. We haven't got any questions yet, and I want to take most of the questions at the end anyway. But just one question, is it hard to get funding for projects like this? You're on mute.
Yes, that is such a great question. Here's what I will say that I experienced is I think everywhere there are trends in special funding and government funding. And so there are ways that some topics become trendy. And for some time, community archives in the US has been recognized as important. I don't want to say trendy like in a dismissive way. Where that is concerning is that is when I think a lot of organizations can see money out there and think, let me leap on this hot topic, rather than, again, having that sort of partnership with communities already set up or being willing to take the time. So in the US, there have been strands of funding for this work, but I think in some ways that up and down nature of funding makes it harder to do community partnerships, if that makes sense.
Thank you very much indeed, and we look forward to speaking more about this after the next presentation. So thank you, Amanda. Now we have a double act. we have Martin Netzel, who's the library director of the State University of the Library of Schleswig-Holstein, and Berit Johansson, who is also the Deputy Library Director of the same library. And together they're going to talk about the library itself, using the library building as a cultural, a support for culture. A bit more about Martin. He's been the director of the Schleswig-Holstein State Library and Cultural Repository, which is in Kiel since 2019, after serving for many years as the deputy head of the cultural department of the state. And he is also a professor for cultural management and digitization policy at the University of Kiel Applied Sciences. Now, I think Berit's not going to join until the discussion at the end, so I will introduce Berit later in more detail. But Martin, would you like to go ahead with your presentation now? Thank you.
We decided to divide the presentation, so you can introduce Berit now, and then we will start with our presentation.
Oh, sorry, Berit. So Berit studied at Christian Albrecht University in Kiel after she graduated from high school, and she has lived in Kiel for more than 20 years, more than 30 years actually. After working as a cultural manager at the Schleswig-Holstein Tourism Agency, she became a consultant, a deputy head of the department in the cultural department of the state of Schleswig-Holstein. You have used the word Schleswig-Holstein lots of times. And since 2019, she has been deputy director of the Schleswig-Holstein State Library. Thank you, Berit. So would you like to go ahead now? Thank you. You're muted, Michael, if you're going to start.
Yes, thank you. I'm starting. I'm so sorry that our state name is so long and complicated to speak out. Yes, you see on our first picture, you see the building we are working in. It's a building which celebrates. It's actually a storehouse, and it celebrates its 100th birthday next year. And so it fits very well, and we have given our institution therefore also a new name in terms of our transformation process we started in 2019 when Martin and I became here the leading team of the library. And this is called Culture Storehouse, so to say, in referring to the history of the building. And now we have, we would like to present you 10 theses in terms of this transformation process we have done the past 6 years as an academic library. And I start to introduce, and then I switch over to Martin, and so we present you the 10 theses in changing each other. For centuries, academic libraries have been regarded as institutions of collective memory, and therefore they collect, organize, and preserve the knowledge and cultural testimonies of the past. And yet today they face a profound paradigm shift, we think. For instance, digital transformation, social change, and new forms of knowledge production are redefining their identity. From guardians of the past to mediators of meaning, from closed repositories to open spaces of exchange. This lecture, as I said, formulates 10 theses showing how academic libraries can preserve cultural heritage while at the same time embracing the future. And now I take over to Martin.
Yes, thank you very much. Here you see what we called old-fashioned. Don't know if it's a term also used in English. in English language. This had been the old library. It's very stable, it's very unmodern, and we transformed it, as Berit said, in a new place, a new library within the city, which has the function of a scientific library at first, but also as a center for competence and digitalization, and as a third place we opened to the society, and we are able to have some guests, workshops, working people here all over the day with very good coffee they got here, which is new for our situation. And our first thesis is to preserve today means to secure access. Here we have two possibilities of our access. It's the main entrance on the right side and the coffee on the left side. To preserve today means to secure access. We think about traditional preservation referred to physical objects, books, manuscripts, prints. That is what we have here in the storage. But in the 21st century, preservation means ensuring that access to knowledge remains open and reliable. The challenge lies less in shielding objects from decay. We do this also, but than in making content discoverable, understandable, and reusable. Sustainable preservation requires proactive access, strategies that are open, interoperable, and user-centered.
And our second thesis is mediation is the new preservation. What's that mean? What once meant guarding and protecting collections now translates into communicating and interpreting them. Knowledge no longer exists as a static archival material, but it becomes meaningful only when shared and engaged with. Academic libraries are evolving into spaces where curational and educational practices are as vital as conservation expertise. Academic librarians become cultural mediators and collections turn into narratives. Mediation transforms cultural heritage into living discourse.
Yeah, this is the next one. Yes, we do digitalize our papers, our manuscript, but this is not an addition. It's a new state of knowledge. Here you see a picture of presenting our manuscripts with virtual reality in our space we have in our storage. Then digitalization radically alters the logic of preservation. It is not merely a tool, but a precondition for cultural participation in the digital age, and it's a tool for democracy, we think. Digitized collections foster networking, contextualization, and participation. Yet they also impose new duties, ensuring data integrity, managing metadata, providing long-term digital preservation, and upholding digital ethics. Libraries must think about digital sustainability as once they thought about material durability, flexibility, collaboratively and continually.
And our fourth thesis is from the collection side to the knowledge ecosystem. We understand the academic library of tomorrow is no longer an island, but part of a connected cultural ecosystem. What does that mean? Partnerships with museums, archives, universities, and civil society create networks of shared memory. We are also have started, or we are about to start also citizen science projects, for instance, at our library. And digital infrastructures, data portals, APIs, shared repositories from the backbone form the backbone of this collaboration. Academic libraries thus become facilitators and coordinators of an open cultural knowledge. That is our experience, or that's what we have gained from the past years of transformation.
Next, this is from collection to commons. Libraries, I told you that embody a democratic ideal, knowledge as a public good. These books, these scripts are not belonging to us as librarians or as us as an archives. This material belongs to the people of Schleswig-Holstein. In the digital world, their role as guarantors of open knowledge becomes even more crucial. The concept of the commons captures this new mission. Resources are created, maintained, and used collectively. Libraries are not only sites of consumption, but also of co-creation through open access, citizen science, what we do in our rooms, and participatory cataloging. These redefines libraries as living commons of culture and knowledge.
And now we come to the physical space, which obviously remains, but the function of this physical space changes. Despite the digital transformation, physical academic libraries continue to play a vital role. People need spaces for focused work, free thought, and community. Yet these spaces are changing, from reading rooms into learning workshops, from silent halls into lively third places. Their value lies in the social atmosphere of shared presence. Here, cultural heritage becomes tangible through design, exhibitions, and dialogue.
The next one, libraries as third places and places of democracy. The concept of third places, thank you to the United States for this concept, beyond home, first place, and work, second place, describes the public and inclusive nature of libraries. They provide low threshold access to education and culture, foster social cohesion, and bring together diverse social groups. Libraries thus serve as democratic infrastructure, open, participatory, and inclusive. In these spaces, cultural heritage becomes lived experience rather than static history. And as you see in our storage, you will get good coffee.
And this obviously requires new skills and new roles. The shift from preservation to mediation demands new professional competencies. Sorry. Digital curation, data management, storytelling, community building, and participatory media work now complement traditional library skills. Academic libraries must become learning organizations, continuously developing the capacity to adapt and innovate. This transformation requires openness, creativity, and institutional agility. And this is something we are we are on a sort of journey with our team through that, and the experiences we make are sometimes challenging, and but we think still that we are on the right way doing that.
So sustainability is important to us as a guiding principle. A forward-looking library is one that acts sustainably, ecologically, socially, and economically. Sustainability encompasses energy efficient buildings, resource-conscious digital strategies, inclusive access, and fair working conditions. But cultural sustainability also matters, passing on what shapes identity in ways that remain meaningful to future generations. Libraries before play an essential role in intergenerational cultural policy. Why do we use this picture? We have, I think, the only library in Germany, maybe in the world. We have a coffee roastery in our library. And this machine there in this room is also once in the world. It's digital, it is powered by AI, and it reduces completely the emissions. So it's also a part for our practicing sustainability.
And in combination with this futuristic coffee roast machine, our next thesis is to shape the future means to reread the past. Academic libraries that look forward, that look toward the future, treat cultural heritage not as finished history, but as a source of inspiration and innovation. By contextualizing, digitizing, and reinterpreting our collections, we create bridges between past and future. Cultural memory becomes therefore a resource for creativity, and academic libraries emerge therefore as spaces where heritage and innovation engage in a living dialogue.
So we see preservation as a movement. The future of libraries lies not in static preservation, but in a dynamic circulation of knowledge. We want to share knowledge. We want to discuss knowledge. We want to make knowledge as an important thing also against fake news and these issues. Preservation and mediation are two sides for us of one mission: to preserve for the future is to keep alive through exchange, openness, and curiosity. Libraries, and also our library, are not only archives of the past, but laboratories for the future. Places where society continually renews its memory, and maybe it's going with hope to the future on a stable ground, and this stable ground is our history. Thank you very much.
Martin and Berit, huge thanks for that. That was absolutely stellar. I could see Amanda nodding at nearly everything you said. We do have a question for you. You're getting lots of claps now. We do have a question for you. Did you involve the community in the design of the new library? Sorry, you're muted, Martin.
Yeah, we discussed who will answer. Yes, yes, we do. We made a workshop, a week 8 to 8, with some inhabitants, with some stakeholders, with some workers on the libraries, with the architects, and with the owner of our building. And so we discussed how to design this new building. And we can say After 5 years, we built 70–80% of this what we decided to do in this workshop. We realized.
Thank you. Well, it is time to draw to a close now. Thank you for a fascinating discussion, all of you. Huge thanks for giving us different perspectives on cultural heritage preservation and how you're doing it. I hope it's been enjoyable and illuminating for you too. We really did appreciate your having done this so late in the year, and thank you very much indeed for giving it so much time and thought.